ਉਹ ਯੂਨੀਫਾਈ ਹਿਊਮੈਨਿਟੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨ ਇਹ ਨਿਊ ਜਰਸੀ ਦੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਬਣਾਈ ਆ
are from us. So we need to engage our youth more at the local level, more at the state level, more at the federal level.
ਨਿਊ ਜਰਸੀ 'ਚ ਕਿੰਗਸਟਨ ਦੇ ਪੈਲੇਸ ਆਫ ਏਸ਼ੀਆ ਵਿਖੇ ਯੂਨੀਫਾਈ ਹਿਊਮੈਨਿਟੀ ਸੰਸਥਾ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਯੂਥ ਪਾਰਟਿਸਿਪੇਸ਼ਨ ਇਨ ਦੀ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲ ਐਰੀਨਾ ਨਾਮ ਦਾ ਸੈਮੀਨਾਰ ਉਲੀਕਿਆ ਗਿਆ, ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਸਮੇਤ ਅਮਰੀਕਨ ਲੀਡਰ ਵੀ ਸ਼ਾਮਿਲ ਹੋਏ। ਇਸ ਸੈਮੀਨਾਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਕੁਝ ਰਿਹਾ ਖਾਸ ਆਓ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਗਿਲ ਪ੍ਰਦੀਪ ਦੀ ਰਿਪੋਰਟ ਜ਼ਰੀਏ। ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀਆਂ ਦਾ ਮੰਨਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅਮਰੀਕਨ ਪੋਲਿਟਿਕਸ 'ਚ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਯੂਥ ਦੀ ਪਾਰਟਿਸਿਪੇਸ਼ਨ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ, ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਮੱਦੇਨਜ਼ਰ ਨਿਊ ਜਰਸੀ ਦੇ ਯੂਥ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਯੂਨੀਫਾਈ ਹਿਊਮੈਨਿਟੀ ਇੱਕ ਨਵੀਂ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨ ਬਣਾਈ ਗਈ, ਜਿਸ ਦਾ ਪਹਿਲਾ ਸੈਮੀਨਾਰ ਆਯੋਜਨ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ। ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਬੂਟਾ ਸਿੰਘ ਖੜੋਤ ਦੀ ਰਹਿਨੁਮਾਈ ਹੇਠ ਭੁਪਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੰਘ, ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤਪਾਲ ਅਤੇ ਨਵਲੀਨ ਕੌਰ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਨਿਊ ਜਰਸੀ ਦੇ ਪੈਲੇਸ ਆਫ ਏਸ਼ੀਆ ਰੈਸਟੋਰੈਂਟ ਵਿਖੇ ਆਯੋਜਿਤ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ, ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਈ ਅਮਰੀਕਨ ਲੀਡਰ ਵੀ ਸ਼ਾਮਿਲ ਹੋਏ।
ਅੱਜ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਮੇਰੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਵੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਯੂਨੀਫਾਈ ਹਿਊਮੈਨਿਟੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨ ਇਹ ਨਿਊ ਜਰਸੀ ਦੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਬਣਾਈ ਆ। ਇਹਦੇ ਥੱਲੇ ਅੱਜ ਇੱਕ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਹੋਇਆ ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਮਰੀਕਨ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਸ਼ੀਅਨਸ, ਅਸੈਂਬਲੀ ਵੂਮਨਸ, ਗਵਰਨਰ ਆਫਿਸ ਤੋਂ ਤੇ ਲੋਕਲ ਟਾਊਨਸ਼ਿਪ ਤੋਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਅਫੀਸ਼ੀਅਲਸ ਇੱਥੇ ਆਏ ਹੋਏ ਸੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਐਜੂਕੇਟ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਲੋਕਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਇਨਵੋਲਵ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਹੋਣਾ, ਸਟੇਟ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ 'ਚ ਇਨਵੋਲਵ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਹੋਣਾ। ਸਾਡੇ ਕਾਂਗਰਸਮੈਨ ਐਂਡੀ ਕੈਮ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉਹ ਸਾਊਥ ਏਸ਼ੀਆ ਤਾਈਵਾਨ ਦੌਰੇ 'ਤੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਅਤੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਆ ਉੱਥੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਾਂਗਰਸਮੈਨ ਪਲੋਸੀ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਗਏ ਹੋਏ ਸੀਗੇ, ਪਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੈਰ ਹਾਜ਼ਰੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇੱਕ ਵੀਡੀਓ ਭੇਜ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਸੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹ ਇੱਥੇ ਲਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆ ਇਹ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਸਟੇਟ ਦੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਸਿਸਟਮ 'ਚ ਇਨਵੋਲਵ ਹੋਣਾ। ਇਹ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੈ ਯੂਨੀਫਾਈ ਹਿਊਮੈਨਿਟੀ। ਸੋ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਸਾਡਾ ਪਹਿਲਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਸੀਗਾ ਅਤੇ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਫਿਊਚਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਅਗਲੇ ਸਾਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਹ ਤੋਂ ਵੀ ਵੱਡਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ। ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਗਲੋਬਲ ਟੈਲੀਵਿਜ਼ਨ ਦਾ ਵੀ ਧੰਨਵਾਦੀ ਹਾਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਸਾਰਾ ਕਵਰ ਕੀਤਾ। ਮੈਂ ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਸਰਦਾਰ ਬਲਕਾਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਸੈਣੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਇੱਥੋਂ ਨਿਊ ਜਰਸੀ ਤੋਂ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸਮੈਨ ਨੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਸਾਰਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਇੱਥੇ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਵੀ ਸਪੋਂਸਰ ਕੀਤਾ। ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਵੀ ਤਹਿ ਦਿਲੋਂ ਧੰਨਵਾਦੀ ਹਾਂ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੀ ਏਜ ਦੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਰਿਸੋਰਸਿਸ ਬਣੀਏ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਅਤੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਨਕਰੇਜ ਹੋਣ, ਉਹ ਇੰਸਪਾਇਰ ਹੋਣ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਸਤੇ।
But one key thing as a minority we need to understand is that we have been living in this country as a Sikh diaspora for the last 130 years. We have contributed socially, culturally, economically, and also we are expanding our wings in the political front. But one key thing which we need to understand is that still the line of politics is little too far from us. So we need to engage our youth more at the local level, more at the state level, more at the federal level, maybe through internships, maybe through participating in the local government with the boards, with the commissions. One key thing is that you can be part of the local government commissions and boards, doing a full-time job also, and being as a board member onto various commissions. So I believe that this particular seminar has tried to cut across all those edges and provide such kind of information, be more informative on the front, and try to help the youth gain access to those areas which they want.
So our message here was pretty simple. We want to see the youth become leaders. Leaders are not born, leaders are made. So again, our key stakeholders want our youth to become leaders. And in any field you are, medical, science, I myself I'm a Rutgers student, just become leaders in them, be good at them. And politics is not a dirty game. Politics is something for everybody to be part of. It's selfless service, and there's no better community than the Sikh community that knows about selfless service. So again, thank you for your time. And our key stakeholders, we appreciate your funding. We appreciate your time as well to come out here. So thank you.
Myself, I'm excited to see how far our community will expand in politics, and I can't wait for all of you to be the face of the youth community. But for those who don't know me, my name is Navleen Kaur Karad, Bhutta Singh Karad's daughter. Some of my accomplishments in politics are that I used to intern for the Assemblywoman Carol Murphy and now currently working for her. And although I wasn't running up against anyone during the elections, I did in fact win the female Democratic Committee member of Mount Laurel, and now one of the candidates for the school board. And this is only the beginning. But my job for this afternoon is to kindly introduce all of the guest speakers. First is the Congressman of New Jersey's 3rd Congressional District, Andy Kim. Congressman Kim has made it his life's work to serve for the nation. He worked for both Democrats and Republicans as a professional public servant, including positions at USAID, the Pentagon, the State Department, the White House National Security Council, and in Afghanistan as an advisor to Generals Petraeus and Allen. Unfortunately, the congressman was unable to make it to today's event due to work. He's a part of the Foreign Relation Affair community and had an emergency trip in South Asia with Nancy Pelosi.
And the countries are such. So every single community, minority, or the other ones have to struggle and survive through. Now, Sikhs have been a diaspora in this country for close to 130 years. During the timeline of 130 years, Sikhs have contributed on the principles of humanity as one race, on social, cultural, economic, and political front to a certain extent. Now, Sikhs have a population of close to 1 million and over the time span of this past 1.5 century, at the point of time when they first landed on the West Shore. During the duration, Sikhs have been subjected to multiple challenges on the multiple fronts, ranging from the identity crisis, discrimination to hate crime. And every minority out there in the world has its own set of unique challenges, and so would the unique solutions required to deal with those challenges. As a minority and the world's 5th largest religion in the world, we find it crucial that Sikhs should increase their partake in the government offices, may it be the legislative branch, may it be the executive branch. Although Sikh students and youths have been involved themselves through the various internships at the various levels, but we still feel that there is a lot more that needs to be done at the ground level. And in order to provide that political mentorship and the right kind of guidance to join those platforms, we have our keynote speakers over here who would try to focus on all those key areas which can help the students and the youth from the minority communities to come up on the front and partake opportunities at the various levels of the government. So we see that over the period of time, there has been a negative stereotype about politics among the youth. And it's pretty much important for us to break that negative stereotype. And in order to break that negative stereotype, we'll have a panel of our speakers. And one of our moderators will be questioning them. She will focus on all those key areas which are required to be removed, which are coming over as a major barrier in the long run. So thereby recognizing this immediate need, Unify Humanity has organized this seminar to highlight those key areas on which Sikh youth may focus on. The 2-hour format for this afternoon will be peeking into the future prospects at the local, state, and federal level.
ਇਸ ਸੈਮੀਨਾਰ 'ਚ ਅਮਰੀਕਨ ਲੀਡਰ, ਅਸੈਂਬਲੀ ਵੂਮਨ ਸਮੇਤ ਅਮਰੀਕਨ ਬਿਊਰੋਕਰੇਟਸ ਅਤੇ ਅਮਰੀਕਨ ਪੋਲਿਟਿਕਸ 'ਚ ਵੱਡੇ ਅਹੁਦਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਕੰਮਕਾਰ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਲੀਆਂ ਸ਼ਖਸੀਅਤਾਂ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਪੈਨਲ ਡਿਸਕਸ਼ਨ ਕਰਦਿਆਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਕੀਤੇ ਗਏ। ਇਸ ਸਮੇਂ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਸਵਾਲ ਜਵਾਬ ਕੀਤੇ ਗਏ।
Impacted by policies that were designed and driven by people who had never set foot in the communities that were impacted by these policies. I saw decisions being made and handed down by administrators that couldn't relate, communicate, or even understand where my students were coming and functioning from. And so in order to have that type of representation, the type of impact, the type of community that you want to see and be a part of and that benefits you and your family and your neighbors, it comes down to that local involvement that everybody's been touching on. And not just local involvement, obviously, there's state involvement, there's federal involvement, there's all these different layers that you can engage with depending on your interest. But in my opinion, in the work that I've done, the work that I do, it's really the local involvement that really makes the impact. It's getting to know who your neighbors are. It's getting to know who your legislators are. It's getting to know who your local elected officials are and what they're responsible for. If you're having trouble, this is something that I dealt with and my students dealt with in Trenton. If I was having trouble on a snow day, I often couldn't get out of my driveway because the road that I lived on hadn't been plowed yet. My students dealt with the same thing. So when and my students dealt with a snow day, it was up to me as an adult in the room impacted by and knowledgeable of these issues to communicate and get to know my local council people to advocate for the issues that we're dealing with, to make sure that our roads get plowed on those side streets, especially if we haven't called a snow day for school. We can't expect students to get into a class if they can't even get out into the street. So that's kind of like my concrete example of why this type of involvement is so important and why I actually left the classroom to engage in opportunities such as this to hopefully inspire and connect with other communities. As was mentioned in my bio, I'm Jewish. I work for a Jewish community org. And one of the reasons I do that is because I think it's really important for people to be authentic to who they are and their values in the type of leadership that they lead. Right? We're all informed and infused by our family, those who have come before us, our religious and ethnic traditions, and that informs our perspective in the community and in politics and government. And if we are authentically ourselves and live by our values, even in those spaces where it might not always be comfortable, we are increasing diversity and representation. We are paving the way for others to come behind us and come up with us. And we're changing the mindsets of those around us and building bridges across communities. Because one of the things that we've talked about here with Unify Humanity, and several of my colleagues have touched on, is this idea of working together in collaboration.
So just a little bit about myself. As Natalie said, I do serve as the Majority Whip in the State of New Jersey General Assembly, which comes with a lot of responsibilities, but more importantly, I'm one of two in South Jersey legislative leadership. I think, just a little bit about how I got there, which I think is really important, because many people like yourselves will come up to me and say, hey, how do I get involved in politics? How do I get involved in campaigns? How do I run for an office? And I think it's important to remember that if you start volunteering for many campaigns, that is going to lead you into a bigger role. And then you start getting to know people and networking. How I became into politics, to believe it or not, was back in 1980s, which I'm not going to tell you when, because then you'll know how old I am. But I will tell you, I wanted to be a coach for for Marlton, actually, for a girls' baseball team, softball team, soccer, whatever it was going to be. And the attorney I worked with, he knew the mayor of Marlton at the time. To make a long story short, I went through this whole process of sending in my resume to be a coach. And it ended up that my boss at the time, who was an attorney, had got me a position on the Recreation Advisory Board within Marlton. And that started it off because it allowed me to get to know people, and then it started me off in the Democratic Party. And then I became the treasurer, and then the treasurer of the county party candidate, and then hence I am here now. But you know what was more important for me as a candidate, and this is why I'm telling you, because I don't want you to give up after the first time. You're never a failure as long as you continue trying. You never fail at anything. When you fail is when you stop trying. So I ran twice before, once for Marlton Council, and then in 2001 I ran for Assembly again with Governor McGreevy. And I can tell you those two losses, it didn't deter me from running. What it did was set me on a straight of where I need to go. You need to know where you don't go, where you're not supposed to be in order to get where you need to get to, right? So with that being said, it gave me a whole new opening. And the job that I'm doing now, whether you call it a public servant, whether you call it a politician, whether you call me an assemblywoman, I am just Carol. I am here to make sure that everyone knows I'm one of all of you. I started out the same way all of you did. I grow in the same way all of you will. And I think it's important. As we move forward through this process today, and I know we're going to be having a lot of questions asked and answered. One of the biggest things that you can also do is like what Natalie did. She came to my office. She started interning for me, got to know what the job was like, how it was great working in the office. Now she is someone who works for me, and I rely so heavily on her ability to come and do what we need to do and actually be part of my office. And that's where it all starts. When we talk about layers of government, one of the things that I think we sort of lost track of is the difference and that separation between governing and politics. Politics plays a huge role in all of our lives. Whether you're in government, you're a lawyer, you're a doctor, whatever that case may be, politics will play a role, not in your central part of Democrat versus Republican, or Democrat versus independent, or independent versus Republican, whatever that case may be, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the political scheme and environment that we all go through the job. When you're in government, you have to remember one thing, that you work for everybody, regardless of who they are, regardless of where they come from, regardless of what their opinion is. The one job as a government official I take pride in is that I love to work with various folks from all different kind of cultures, religion, countries, states. That's why I joined the National Conference of State Legislatures. I just came back from Denver yesterday, and we were sitting in on the international conference for a little while, and I got to meet so many people, whether they were from Guam or Africa or European. I met with the European ambassador. I've had communication with the Indian ambassador out of a consul general out of New York. These are what I like to do. And that is part of governing I consider to be the most pleasurable for me. But one of the things I think that we've lost track of is what civics is in our schools and in our colleges. While you've gone through college, and you're still, some of you may still be, some of you may have graduated, some of you may be just starting. You have to remember one thing, civics is about what it takes as a process that we have to all know. What is civics? What is it that we do on a level that allows a bill to become a law, where it starts, where it goes through, and what that process is. But more importantly, when you work in the State House and you have people on both sides of the aisle, you have to remember, you have to work with them. Because whether you're in the majority or minority party, we all have one commonality, and that's to get our legislation passed to better serve everybody in New Jersey. One of the things that we
ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦਾ ਮੁੱਖ ਮੰਤਵ ਇਹ ਜਾਣਨਾ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਯੂਥ ਦੀ ਪਾਰਟਿਸਿਪੇਸ਼ਨ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਪੋਲਿਟਿਕਸ ਕਿੰਨੀ ਕੁ ਹੋਣੀ ਲਾਜ਼ਮੀ ਹੈ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਵਰਗੇ ਦੇਸ਼ਾਂ 'ਚ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉੱਚ ਅਹੁਦਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਬਿਰਾਜਮਾਨ ਨੇ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ MLA, MP, ਡਿਫੈਂਸ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਆਦਿ ਸ਼ਾਮਿਲ ਨੇ। ਪਰ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਸ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੱਕ ਦਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਲੀਡਰ ਹਾਲੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਣ ਸਕਿਆ। ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਇਹੀ ਕਾਰਨ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਆ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਮੁਸ਼ਕਿਲਾਂ ਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਢੁਕਵਾਂ ਹੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਿਲਦਾ। ਰੋਜ਼ਮਰਾ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਹੇਟ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਜਾਂ ਹੋਰ ਐਸੀਆਂ ਘਟਨਾਵਾਂ ਵੇਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਕਿਤੇ ਵੀ ਕੋਈ ਸੁਣਵਾਈ ਨਹੀਂ, ਪਰ ਉੱਥੇ ਹੀ ਜੇਕਰ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਨੌਜਵਾਨ ਵੱਡਾ ਲੀਡਰ ਬਣੇਗਾ ਤਾਂ ਸਾਡੀ ਸੁਣਵਾਈ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਹੋਵੇਗੀ। ਦਸਤਾਰ ਸਜਾ ਕੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਨੌਜਵਾਨ ਉੱਚ ਅਹੁਦਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਬਿਰਾਜਮਾਨ ਹੋਣਗੇ ਤਾਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦਸਤਾਰ ਬਾਰੇ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਝਾਉਣ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਵੇਗੀ। ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਧਿਆਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰੱਖਦਿਆਂ ਇਹ ਸੈਮੀਨਾਰ ਉਲੀਕਿਆ ਗਿਆ, ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਮਰੀਕਨ ਲੀਡਰਸ ਨੇ ਬੇਹੱਦ ਸਾਥ ਦਿੱਤਾ।
Medina Muhammad. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm glad to be here today. I hail from the city of East Orange in northern New Jersey. And I know you've heard a little bit about my bio, but I wanted to talk more about youth involvement, and I know we'll have a more intimate conversation later. But as a young person, and this is not a dig at any of the other members of our panel that we'll hear from later, but I think I'm probably the youngest person on the panel. But as a younger person, our voices in government are essential. They're crucial to the future of our nation and of our state, and it's so important that we're involved. I started my career just as an intern. I reached out to then the president of the Freeholder Board, and that board is now called the Board of Commissioners. At the time, the president was Brittany Timberlake. And in my senior year at Montclair State University, I reached out and I said, well, what is a freeholder and what do you do? You know, what form of government is this? And much to my surprise, she wrote back and said, come down to my office and find out. And I did just that. It is our voices that can truly make the difference. And from there, I started off as an intern, completely unpaid, but I was very curious and fearless. I spoke up, I asked questions, and I learned along the way. And I think that's the most important part about being a young person involved in government and in politics, is that you use your voice to learn and also to make a difference, to speak out, and to stand up for your community. As a young woman, as someone who identifies as a woman, as a person of color, all of those factors come into the way that I contribute to the work that I do in my space as a member of the Governor's Office of Legislative Affairs. As a senior legislative aide in the Governor's Office of Legislative Affairs, I serve as a liaison between the governor and the legislature, as you heard from the Assemblywoman. A lot of what the Assemblywoman does as one branch of the government also involves another branch, which is the executive, the governor. And the way that is best done is through communication to those both branches. And as a liaison for the governor, we ensure that relationships are built so that communities are represented in every part of policymaking and legislation. So whether that be representing people of color, whether that may be creating changes to create affordability throughout our state, whether that includes being a voice for young people who are seeking affordability in college tuition. All of those things come into play in my place of work. And outside of working for the governor's office, I'm also involved locally. That too started with just raising my voice and being curious. And I encourage each of you to do the same, to get involved in your local Democratic or whatever organization you would prefer, but get involved and be a voice. I started out in my local Democratic organization as a volunteer, phone banking, knocking on doors, being a part of the change that was coming forth, but also, again, offering my voice to make my community better. Soon after, I was appointed to serve as treasurer for the New Jersey Democratic State Committee. And again, one of the youngest members of that board. Today, I presently serve as a member of the East Orange Parking Authority Commission, a major part of any urban center that you visit. I'm sure the first thing you probably ask someone when you're invited out is, do they have parking? And parking is crucial in New Jersey, especially as the #1 densest state in our nation.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Steven Steglick. I'm the Deputy Mayor of Mount Laurel, New Jersey. I am proud to be here to talk to you about local government. Local government is something that is not for everybody, but it is one of the most rewarding branches of government that you can get involved in. Starting local is advice I've received many times, one from Carol Murphy and many other people, because you tend to get your bearings and you start to learn a thing or two. So I was really glad to do that. Local politics and government is raw. It is unfiltered. You are closer to the rumor mill and hearing whispers from your neighbors and friends and family, and it's rewarding, but it can be taxing. These issues that you level, taxes, economic development, public safety, housing, all affect your neighbors directly. This is the level of government where you receive a lot of calls about your trash pickup or your snowplow, things that affect your life in the day in, day out. Now, I started locally in the town council. I was elected in 2018. I've been serving for nearly 4 years. My re-election's actually this year. Town council is your local representation, oversees the direction of your community. Like I said, your budget, your taxes, events, trash pickup, road development, snowplows, these issues that affect your neighborhoods. Zoning and planning board. You can get involved in your zoning or planning board. That's ways that implement and discuss development within your community. If you ever wondered why is there a Wawa down the street from another Wawa in your town, that's your planning and zoning board. You should probably get involved and make sure there's not too many Wawas. Another way you can do it is also school board. That's your town council for your board of education. Nobody here can talk to you about your school better than you do, because you're more closer of a product of it than anybody else. I always advise people run for the Board of Education. I did that in Maple Shade. I served for nearly 3 years. That is always a fun and entertaining board, because obviously you also talk about curriculum, things like that, which has been a hot topic as of late. Then in Mount Laurel, there's been numerous other boards that you can do, issue-based boards. We have an environmental commission that looks after not just development, but making sure development is happening in an environmentally conscious state. And that's an important thing for a state like New Jersey. We also have a library board, pretty self-explanatory, and our diversity and inclusion board, which is to make sure that we celebrate our people in our community, the people that make our community great, but also making sure that people know that they have a local government entity that can answer any questions or concerns and make sure that everybody's feeling involved. Now, some bits of advice I would share with you if you were to get involved in local government. First is a warning: don't do it. No, I'm just kidding. No, if you do it, don't get involved unless you love people. I do not mean in a biblical sense of love thy neighbor, although that is very important. I mean it in the sense that you have to be able to love your neighbor and love the people that you're serving. And that is people of all races, religion, creeds, color, people that you will absolutely disagree with. Carol Murphy touched upon it. You have to represent people that do not like you and you do not agree with, but you still represent them, and that's an absolutely important thing. I think that it's one of those things that will keep you going when the days get dark in local government, when things get a little heavy. And it can get a little heavy and a little dark. So loving your neighbor, loving what you're doing and why you're doing it, which is for the people, is very important.
ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਹੋਣੇ ਬੇहद ਲਾਜ਼ਮੀ ਨੇ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਯੂਥ ਨੂੰ ਐਨਕਰੇਜ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾ ਸਕੇ ਕਿ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਸਮੇਂ 'ਚ ਅਮਰੀਕਨ ਪੋਲਿਟਿਕਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਸ਼ਾਮਿਲ ਹੋ। ਆਸ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਯੂਥ ਇਸ ਸੈਮੀਨਾਰ ਤੋਂ ਸੇਧ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਭਵਿੱਖ 'ਚ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੀ ਬਿਹਤਰੀ ਲਈ ਚੰਗਾ ਸਟੈਪ ਲਵੇਗਾ ਤੇ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਸਮੇਂ 'ਚ ਇਹ ਸੈਮੀਨਾਰ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਵੱਡਾ ਹੋਵੇਗਾ। ਨਿਊ ਜਰਸੀ ਤੋਂ ਕਿਲਪਰਦੀਪ ਦੀ ਰਿਪੋਰਟ, ਗਲੋਬਲ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਟੀਵੀ।
ਹੁਣ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ ਗਲੋਬਲ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਟੀਵੀ ਨੂੰ ਡਾਊਨਲੋਡ ਕਰੋ ਸਾਡੀ ਐਪ ਐਂਡਰੋਇਡ ਜਾਂ iOS ਤੇ ਫ੍ਰੀ ਵਿੱਚ, roku ਅਤੇ Amazon Fire TV ਤੇ ਜਾਂ Apple TV ਤੇ। ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਦੇਖ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ ਲਾਈਵ ਸਟ੍ਰੀਮਿੰਗ www.globalpunjabtv.com ਤੇ।